I stood in the marble courthouse lobby, my briefcase containing 12 years of lies. 3 floors above me sat the woman who raised me since I was 6, the woman I called Mom for over a decade. Patricia had no idea her stepdaughter wasn't just another broke millennial struggling to make rent. I was a federal prosecutor. And I had just built an airtight fraud case against my own family. My name is Maya Hartwell, and this is the story of how I took back everything they stole from me. The forensic accountant's report arrived on a Tuesday morning. I opened it in my office at the Department of Justice, surrounded by case files of white-collar criminals. I had no idea I was about to add my own family to that list. $500,000. That's what my mother left me before cancer took her when I was 6. A trust fund meant to secure my future, my education, my life. At 18, when I was supposed to access it, Patricia sat me down with tears in her eyes and told me it was gone. Bad investments, she said. The market crash. There was nothing left. I believed her. For 12 years, I believed every word. But the accountant's findings told a different story. The money wasn't lost. It was stolen. Transferred into Patricia's personal accounts through fake investment companies. My mother's signature forged on documents. And my father, Dr. Richard Hartwell, respected cardiologist, had co-signed every fraudulent paper. My hands shook as I traced the transactions. Brandon's BMW, Chelsea's $80,000 wedding, the down payment on their mansion. Everything they enjoyed while I worked myself to exhaustion was funded by my dead mother's money. I was 18 when Patricia delivered the news, fake sympathy dripping from every word. I cried myself to sleep that night. The next morning, I started working double shifts at the diner. Patricia watched me leave at 5 in the morning and said hard work builds character. Character. Right. For 12 years, I built character while they built empires on my inheritance. I worked 3 jobs to afford community college. I wore thrift store clothes to family dinners where Brandon showed off designer watches. I lived in a studio apartment with a broken heater while Chelsea remodeled her bathroom for the 3rd time. At Brandon's 21st birthday, Dad handed him keys to that new BMW. I showed up straight from my shift, smelling like grease. Brandon looked at me and laughed. Maybe if you worked harder, he said, you could afford a real car. Everyone laughed. Dad said nothing. He never did. Chelsea's wedding was worse. $80,000 for one day. I wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid. I showed up in a borrowed dress and watched Patricia cry tears of joy. This is what family does for each other, she said, looking straight at me. The cruelty wasn't explosive, it was constant. 1,000 small cuts. Comments about my pathetic apartment. Jokes about my work ethic. Christmas gifts that felt like insults. Discount store gift cards. Self-help books about financial success. They made me feel worthless. Like I had failed while they succeeded. They had no idea what I was becoming. At 24, Georgetown Law accepted me. Full scholarship. I didn't tell them. I let Patricia think I was still waitressing while I studied constitutional law. I let Brandon think I was a failure while I graduated top of my class. I let Chelsea believe I was jealous while I passed the bar exam on my first try. When I became a federal prosecutor specializing in financial crimes, I kept that secret too. At family dinners, when they asked what I did, I would shrug. Office work, nothing exciting. Patricia would pat my hand. At least you're employed, she would say. I had spent 2 years prosecuting embezzlers and fraudsters who thought they were untouchable. I had put CEOs in prison. I had dismantled money laundering operations. And then I hired a forensic accountant to investigate my own family. The evidence was devastating. Every transaction documented. Every forged signature analyzed. Every fake company traced back to Patricia's accounts. I filed the lawsuit on a Friday. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, forgery. The documents were delivered to their mansion, the house bought with my mother's money. Patricia called 30 minutes later, screaming. "How dare you?" she said. "After everything we did for you, after we raised you, gave you a home, treated you like family." I leaned back in my chair, perfectly calm. Years in the courtroom had taught me control. See you in court, Patricia. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the window. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was still that naive 18-year-old, too weak to fight back. They had no idea I had spent 12 years sharpening myself into exactly what they should have feared. In 3 weeks, the trial would begin, and I was going to destroy them. The courtroom was packed the day the trial began. Media everywhere, cameras flashing outside. This was a high-profile case now. Respected doctor's family accused of stealing from his own daughter. I walked in wearing my prosecutor's suit, chin up, shoulders back. Patricia, Richard, Brandon, and Chelsea sat at the defense table looking smug, like this was all some misunderstanding that would blow over. Their lawyer stood first, painted me as a vindictive stepdaughter with a grudge, said I was bitter about my life choices and looking for someone to blame. The jury listened, some nodding. I stayed calm. I had been in courtrooms long enough to know opening statements were just theater. The evidence was what mattered. When my turn came, I stood and looked each juror in the eye. Then I presented the truth. Bank transfers, dates, amounts. $500,000 moved systematically from my trust fund into Patricia's personal accounts. Fake investment companies created to hide the theft. My mother's signature forged on transfer documents. My father's name co-signed on every fraudulent paper. I watched Patricia's face as I laid it out. The smugness started to crack. The forensic accountant took the stand next. He was brilliant, methodical. He traced every dollar. Brandon's BMW, purchased 3 months after a $50,000 transfer. Chelsea's wedding, funded by a $75,000 withdrawal. The house down payment, transferred 2 weeks before closing. Every luxury they enjoyed mapped directly back to my stolen inheritance. Their lawyer tried to argue it was family money used for family purposes. I countered immediately. The trust was legally designated for Maya Hartwell alone, established by her late mother. I introduced the original trust documents, my mother's handwriting, her wishes, clear and explicit. This money was for me, only me. The jury saw it now. This wasn't a family disagreement. This was theft. During the lunch recess, I went to the courthouse bathroom to collect myself. The door swung open. Chelsea walked in, her heels clicking on the tile. She cornered me by the sinks. "You're really going to send Mom to prison," she said. "Over money?" I turned to face her. She stole my mother's legacy. My mother died to give me that future. Brandon appeared in the doorway. "We're family," he said. "Family forgives." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You made me work until midnight while you partied with my inheritance. That's not family." Then my father showed up, trying to pull me aside. "Please, sweetheart, drop this. We can work something out." That's when the emotion finally hit me. "You signed the papers, Dad. You helped her steal from your own daughter. You watched me struggle for 12 years and said nothing." He opened his mouth, closed it. Guilt flickered across his face. Then he walked away. Just like he always did. Back in the courtroom, I made my strategic move. I called myself as a witness. The defense objected, but the judge allowed it. I took the stand and testified about the 12 years of manipulation, working 3 jobs while they vacationed in Europe, being mocked for my thrift store clothes while they wore designer labels, the Christmas gifts that felt like insults, the constant reminders that I was less than them. Then came the turn. At 24, I was accepted to Georgetown Law. I paused. Let that sink in. I did not tell them. I became a federal prosecutor specializing in financial crimes. I have built my career prosecuting people exactly like them. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Patricia's face drained of color. Brandon gripped the table. Chelsea stared at me like I was a stranger. Their lawyer looked panicked. They had thought I was still struggling, still that waitress they could push around. They had no idea who I had become. Patricia made the fatal mistake of taking the stand. Under cross-examination, she contradicted herself repeatedly. Tried to claim the money was compensation for raising me. I produced receipts showing my mother's trust had paid for all my childhood expenses. Patricia broke down, voice shaking. She was never grateful, she said. We gave her a home. I looked at her from the prosecution table. My mother gave me a home. You took everything she left me. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they filed back in, the forewoman would not look at Patricia. My heart pounded as I stood. 12 years of suffering would be answered in the next 60 seconds. We find the defendants guilty on all counts. Patricia gasped, grabbed Richard's arm like it could save her. Brandon and Chelsea looked at each other in pure horror. The word guilty echoed in my head. But I stayed silent. I had learned a long time ago not to celebrate too early in a courtroom. Then the judge read the damages. $2.3 million. The original $500,000 plus punitive damages and 12 years of interest and suffering. The courtroom erupted. Patricia's lawyer was already shuffling papers, probably preparing an appeal that would never succeed. The judge banged his gavel, voice stern. This court finds the defendants engaged in deliberate, systematic fraud against a vulnerable young woman who had just lost her mother. I closed my eyes for one moment. Thought of my mom. Wished she could see this. 2 weeks later came sentencing. This was when the real consequences hit. Patricia received 5 years in federal prison for fraud and embezzlement. My father lost his medical license for signing fraudulent documents. 18 months probation. His entire career, gone. Brandon and Chelsea were ordered to pay restitution. They would have to sell their homes, liquidate assets. The perfect lives they built on my money collapsed in real time. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed them. Patricia tried to hide her face. Brandon shoved a camera away, angry. Chelsea was crying. I watched from a distance, felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt. Just emptiness where anger used to live. But Patricia was not done yet. At her sentencing hearing, the judge gave her a chance to speak before her prison term began. She stood, mascara running, hands shaking. Please, Your Honor. I raised her. I loved her like my own daughter. The judge was not impressed. You stole from her like she was a stranger. Then Patricia turned to me. Dropped the victim act completely. Her face twisted with rage. You're destroying this family, she screamed across the courtroom. Everything we built, you're tearing us apart. The room went dead silent. Bailiff stepped forward, ready to intervene. I stood slowly, picked up my briefcase, started walking toward the exit. Then I stopped. Turned back to face her one final time. My voice was calm, steady, carried through the silent room. No, I'm the prosecutor. You're the criminal. There's a difference. Patricia's face contorted. Rage and desperation and disbelief all at once. She screamed again. I gave you everything. I looked at her without blinking. You took everything. The jury agreed. The law agreed. And now you'll pay. She collapsed. Richard caught her, but barely. Chelsea was sobbing into her hands. Brandon stared at me with pure hatred. I did not flinch. I had faced down worse criminals than them in my career. They were nothing special. I walked out of that courtroom and did not look back. Not once. Outside, autumn's sun hit my face. Reporters shouted questions. I ignored every single one. Got into my car, sat in silence, pulled out the only photo I had of my mother. Her smile, forever frozen at 32. I got it back, Mom. All of it. $2.3 million. I knew exactly what I would do with it. Half would go to a scholarship fund for kids who lost parents. The other half I would use to finally live the life my mother wanted for me. Not to prove anything to Patricia or my father or my step-siblings, but because I deserved it. Because my mother worked hard to give me that chance. Because after 12 years of suffering, I had earned my peace. 6 months later, I was living in a new apartment. Elegant, earned, mine. Still prosecuting financial fraud cases, still putting criminals behind bars. One morning, an email arrived. Patricia had been released early for good behavior after serving 3 years. She wanted to meet. Said she had changed. Wanted to apologize. I read the first line and deleted it without finishing. Some people deserve forgiveness. Some people deserve second chances. Patricia was not one of them. She had stolen 12 years of my life, my mother's final gift, my dignity. 3 years in prison did not erase that. I closed my laptop and looked out at the city skyline. Patricia would never get back what she lost. Her freedom, her reputation, her perfect family illusion. I had taken it all, legally and completely. And unlike her, I would sleep perfectly tonight. Justice, it turned out, was the sweetest revenge of all. Thanks for listening to the end. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, justice, and revenge.